Hey guys, it's Tashara from Politics and Fashion coming to you today from my bathroom because we're going to do a get ready with me while I spill all the tea. I'm going to share with you all why I quit my job as a lawyer. Let's get started. The reason why I wanted to create this video at the beginning of the year is because I know so many of us are in moments of transition. We're thinking about quitting jobs, changing careers. We're thinking about quitting relationships, bad habits, etc. And for me, it all kind of starts in the same place, and it is a mindset shift. And the way I was able to do that, y'all, was with therapy. I've shared that with you before in my wellness habits video. I will link it down below to dig deeper into my mental health journey. But I want to say now that my relationship with my BetterHelp therapist has changed everything for me. And this part of today's video is sponsored by my friends over at BetterHelp. For those who do not know, BetterHelp is a platform that connects you with licensed mental health professionals. I love it because of the ease by which I'm able to connect. I travel so much and I'm able to just schedule my appointment through the app and actually speak directly to my therapist on the same app. I'm not having to remember logins, etc. I can even jump into group therapy classes, which I have loved and have been a huge component of my healing and addressing certain traumas that I've experienced. And the best part is that they have a sliding scale, so you can seek out therapeutic services in a way that is affordable for you. All you have to do is log on, fill out a brief questionnaire. It is so intuitive to fill out, y'all, and you are able to be connected to a professional who best meets your needs. Click the link in my bio to use my code and get started. During the story time, I'm going to be putting on my makeup. This is my everyday face while I work from home. It's a no makeup everyday look that I love to do. Now, let me take off my bifocals, child. Y'all talk about these all the time. You often ask. These are frames by Warby Parker, and yes, they are progressives because I'm at a big age. Let's get started with the Vitamin Enriched Face Base. This one is by Bobbi Brown. Of course, my skin is already clean. I have done my skincare, but I still like adding this base, y'all, because I find that it hydrates my skin well. It is so silky smooth, and it gives my makeup a really nice grip. Next up, I grabbed this small size of the Milk Hydro Primer. This was a recommendation by I Know Lee, and I have loved it. I grabbed the small size because I wasn't sure. With oily skin, anything that says hydro, I don't really know about, but this has actually been really, really good. So I'm going to put probably about a dime size of that on my face, concentrating in the areas where I tend to get the most oily. Then I begin to kind of pat it in to make sure it fully absorbs. Now, the next product, y'all, I could typically stop here if I didn't want to add a foundation, but today I'm going to use it as an additional primer, and it is the Danessa Myricks Blurring Balm. Let me show you the deep complexion because I got it in a deeper tone over Christmas. I started with this one. As you can see, I'm down to the pan. So it does actually go on pretty translucent. However, this provides even greater coverage if I don't want to do foundation. But I am going to do foundation, again, using this as a primer, but I want to show you the color. This is color number 10. And look how even it makes my skin look. Most days, I honestly just put on my blurring balm and then I will fill in my brows, do some eye makeup, do a concealer under my eyes, a lip, and I'm out the door. This is the only complexion product that I will use outside of my concealer. And so I use it in many ways almost like it is a foundation because I think the coverage is great. I don't need anything really heavy day to day. And because my skincare routine has been really good, I feel like I'm in a good place to where I don't need a whole bunch of coverage. We have our base. Let's jump into how I first became an attorney, y'all. This is a little bit of a funny story because I was 4 years old. I will never forget it. I was sitting in the back seat of the car with my grandma and I think my great aunt, her sister, and my cousin, who was about 5 years older than me, Ayana, asked me what I want to be when I grew up. And I said, I don't know. And she said, how about a lawyer? And I said, what's that? And Ayana said, I don't know. but they make a lot of money. And I said, oh, well then I want to be a lawyer. And I was the first grandchild on my mom's side, second on my dad's side, but I was a child of teenage parents. And so to have this little precocious kid, I think, who was really into reading, I always loved school, and saying that I wanted to be something like an attorney, and not even knowing any attorneys, black, white, or indifferent, growing up, I think my family just kind of hooked into and never let me forget, even though I didn't know what the hell an attorney did. So it was something that in many ways was kind of determined for me that I had to then lean into later on. So I'll tell you a bit more about that. But this had been my goal essentially since I was 4 years old, and went through high school as an international baccalaureate student. Was able to skip my first year of college at Florida State. After Florida State, y'all, again, I told you I didn't know any attorneys, so I wasn't really sure how to get to law school, but I knew that I had to make this dream come true because it was important not just for me, but for my entire family. And I took about a year and a half, maybe a little bit more actually, I think it was 3 years total, almost off. During that time, I taught school, and I love being an educator, so much so that when I did start law school, I started part-time because I was teaching during the day. And so I started law school at Florida A&M, a Rattler strike, in Orlando because I wanted the HBCU experience, not having had it in undergrad. And the issue, however, is that number one, black students at that time were a minority at the law school because that law school was very much dedicated to kind of like people coming into the legal career profession as a second career. So it was students who in many ways might have been considered non-traditional, which there's nothing wrong with, but it reflected the demographics of the area and not of a typical kind of HBCU and HBCU culture. And what I think also led to that was because the law school was in Orlando and the main campus is in Tallahassee, if you know anything about FAMU. So I decided that what was most important to me at that time was to relocate, and most importantly to find an area that I wanted to live in. I was over Florida. I was definitely over Central Florida, and I just needed to kind of spread my wings and create a life of my own. So the summer of 2007, I decided to move to DC. I applied to law schools. I applied to American and Georgetown because I wanted to continue part-time, and American turned me down. And when I got that letter, I was like, okay, I guess I'm moving back home because I don't know what to do if American didn't let me in. Sure enough, I'm not getting into Georgetown, but God. The second letter that came was from Georgetown, and I got in, and I was one of only 2 students that got in that semester. So it felt like coming from this little small country hometown to getting into Georgetown, one of 2 students, and knowing that Georgetown was my second stop. And having had so many hurdles to overcome to figure out how to get into law school, I was finally right where I was supposed to be. Let's talk about my foundation, because this is the holy grail of holy grails. And I know the makeup girls already knew about this, but y'all didn't tell me. Did nobody call and tell me nothing, okay, about this Estee Lauder Double Wear Stay in Place makeup. You have oily skin, this is the only one you need. Now, I asked you all, how do you get it, because it stays in place. Like, how do you get it from sticking? And y'all said, number one, I don't know why you're like assaulting your skin like that. Because I was aggressive. And y'all was like, okay, first of all, you don't have to do all that. And second, y'all told me to apply it with a wet beauty blender. So I have one for concealer, and then this one is for my foundation. And I just take my Double Wear after I have definitely shaking it up. And y'all also told me only apply it to one section of my face at a time. So let's do that. I get to law school at Georgetown, and I realized right away that I am not someone who is looking forward to going to court. And you're like, well, Tashira, what do you think an attorney does? I always knew that I wanted to do something in public interest law, but again, I'm kind of figuring all of this out as I went, y'all. I didn't have an internship. I didn't have any mentors who were in the field. And so it was clear to me that I wanted to like serve people in some way. I just didn't know how. And that is how I ended up first, y'all, in Nigeria as an intern. over the summer for about 2 months at a human rights organization because I thought I wanted to be a women's human rights attorney. That was my legal clinic in law school. And the clinic is basically where you act as a practitioner. So in that role, I got to go to the UN. I got to work on a report about Kenya's compliance to one of the international treaties called CEDAW. And while I was in Switzerland, I decided I had no interest. I was like, this is actually not what I want to do. I felt like we have too many issues domestically. And I just didn't feel right about kind of holding a foreign country, especially an African country, to certain standards that we were not upholding here in America. So that's now all blended in. It looks a little dark, but we are going to lighten it up. This is the OG NARS Radiant Creamy Concealer in the color Truffle. Y'all already know about this one. It is the one item in my home that I replace nonstop for years and years and years. I don't try anything new. In this case, I stick with what has worked. And you know, I just give myself a little pity pat. I always cover up this scar here that happened, y'all, from a cyst that I had to get professionally removed. I use my other beauty blender, and then we begin to just, you know, do our thing. So if I didn't want to do women's human rights, the question was, what was I going to do? And one thing about me is that I'm not afraid of quitting. And that's why I wanted to share this with you. Because I've always known myself to be a resilient person. I mean, to get from Polk County, Florida, the child of teenage parents, and get to Georgetown Law School, just kind of had this thing that it's going to get figured out. One way or another, we're going to figure this thing out. And one day, I applied to be a research assistant for a professor in the domestic violence clinic at Georgetown and found out that he actually was working on a child welfare article and he needed research support for it. And it was going to be all about breaking the confidentiality in child welfare courts because of the embedded racism in the child welfare system. And I never even thought about it. And it blew my mind and it changed my entire trajectory. From there, I went and I worked at the only firm in DC that represented children in the abuse and neglect system. And from there, I worked in public policy with an organization that oversaw different child welfare agencies across the country, helping them to improve how they serve families and children. Ultimately, when I left public policy, I was a senior associate at a think tank, and I led something called the Alliance for Racial Equity in Child Welfare. But let's talk about why I left. Now that my concealer is all in, what I am going to do, y'all, is set that. And again, this is my everyday makeup. We're not doing too much, okay? This is actually when I have a little bit extra time. So right now I'm kind of flossing for y'all, but why not? All right, I am using, this is from, I think this actually came from Laura Mercier. Did it? Maybe it came from Amazon. Y'all have seen these everywhere. They changed the game for me for sure. And everywhere I put my concealer is where I put it. And my setting powder is by Laura Mercier. And the shade is medium deep. If I'm out and about, I also love something that Bobbi Brown sent me, which is their pressed powder, y'all. And I dropped this recently, so it's broken. Because that's really good just to kind of attack that shine really quickly. I don't really bake, but I do like to go to my brows and my eyeshadow before getting rid of the excess powder. So let's first go to brows. My brows, y'all, are micro bladed, but I haven't had them done. It may have been 2 years in January, I'm not sure. But it's been some time and I'm due for a touch up. So what I like to do is just kind of fill them in with the Brow Wiz by Anastasia Beverly Hills. For me, this is the best brow pencil in the shade Ebony if you are a deep complexion, because I meant to brush them up first, y'all. I find that a lot of these brow pencils, they just have not calibrated them for deeper skin tones, which is a shame that we're still having this conversation in the 21st century. These people done put a man on the moon, but black folks and brown folks can't get makeup that don't make them look ashen. I'm not even gonna have that conversation right now. But Anastasia got this thing right. And I don't really worry about being too precise, y'all, because again, my brows look so much better. Because they all fell out and never really came back once I got breast cancer. And that leads me to why I quit my job in public policy. For a shadow base, I'm going to use the Urban Decay Eyeshadow Primer Potion. Another OG product for me. I have been using this for at least a decade. When you have oily skin, you have to figure out like tricks to help to keep your makeup in place. And this product definitely keeps your skin from creasing. So we love that. And because I'm working from home, I'm not going to get like too fancy, y'all, with the shadow. I just got the Soft Glam palette, also by Anastasia. And let me show you the colors because I feel like these are great everyday colors for a deep complexion. I'm going to use the color Sultry because I love a good old glittery glimmer shimmer. And I think this looks really good with my skin. It's actually my first time using this color. This is cute, Anastasia. Okay, girl, we see you. Okay. Girl, this is how you get in your meetings. And be like, huh? Blinking long as hell. Let me finish doing my eyes and I'll be right back to tell you what happened. Really loving the way that the eyeshadow has come together. I just used two colors and I am gonna do a little something right in the corner of my eye. But before I get there, I want to share with you guys why I left my job at the think tank. I left because of two reasons. Number one, it was so incredibly stressful. And I had a horrible relationship with work that was incentivized by the workplace culture. It started with me having massive fibroid tumors, and at 35, I had to have a partial hysterectomy. I had my uterus out after several surgeries, and they just couldn't save it. And I share this transparently because I think someone can relate to it, that while I was bleeding, I mean, there's nothing that I can even compare it to. My cycle came on in December one year and did not go off until the following summer. So the following, I think, May or June when I had the partial hysterectomy. So I bled solidly for 6 months. I was going on my break to get iron infusions. I was getting blood transfusions, still working, normalizing what I was going through and not really having a workplace that was supportive. But I remember that I had a conference to go to, and instead of sitting the conference out, I wore an adult diaper because there was no pad, no tampon, nothing that could hold the amount of blood flow that was coming out of my body. And I'm thin now, but I was damn near emaciated then, if you can imagine me probably being about 30 pounds lighter and having no energy. I couldn't even get up the stairs. Have the hysterectomy, go back to work, and a year later, I feel a lump in my right breast and end up being diagnosed with early stage breast cancer. I had estrogen-driven invasive ductal carcinoma, which means that my cancer had been created as a result of my body's response to my estrogen. And so I went in and I had a partial double mastectomy, so a lumpectomy essentially. And I soon after, I thought that I was going to go through radiation, and instead I had to go through chemo. So I went through 4 rounds of chemo, and then I went through 19 rounds of radiation. And this all happened, y'all, I think before I turned 37. And during this all, we had a death in the family, a loss that was very tragic. My younger cousin, who was like my nephew, he was electrocuted at work, his first job out of Job Corps. And so I'm just dealing with loss after loss, like hit after hit. And I just felt something had to change. I remember being at Xavier's funeral, and in the South we have a wake before we actually have the services, and I couldn't even mourn and get to the wake because I was working on a grant report. And then by Monday, when I go to chemo following his services, I'm trying to rush and finish the grant report before the chemo takes over, and I'm too tired and too sick to finish it. This was all while my job knew that I was experiencing the loss of a loved one. But I think culturally, for Black people, cousins and nieces and nephews means something different to us. And so many workplaces, they really only care about bereavement as it relates to your mama or your child or your spouse. It's very nuclear in that way, but that's not the caretaking model that I knew. And we had all played a very significant role in raising my cousin, and to have lost him at 21 was devastating to me. And as I'm writing this report, I just realized that my life was going to change. And I didn't give myself any other option. And so while I was still bought from chemo, y'all, I began to plan my exit, and I got very serious about determining what that could be. I have this very small brush. I think it's a lipstick brush, but I am going to use it to give me a little pop in the corner of my eye. And this color is called Dreamer. This is something that, y'all, I have been doing for years. I want to say I got this from like Jackie Ina. And it still is one of my favorite components of my makeup routine. It gives my eyes a pop, and it makes them just look a little bit more open. I'm not going to put on lashes today, so that is something that is important to me. As a person of color, it can be hard to find like pigmented products, from our eyeshadows to our blushes, that really show up on our skin. And shout out once again to Danessa Myricks, because her cream blushes are everything. This color is called Dancing Queen, and when you see the color payoff on this, I'm sure you could probably put it on your lips as well. And so I just take my finger and rub it on my cheek. So while I was still bald from chemo, y'all, I literally printed out a handful of resumes and went to Tyson's Galleria, which is the luxury mall in our area, and passed out my resumes. And I remember I was standing in the hallway across from Saint Laurent, and while I was there, I looked in and I was so intimidated. It was, they were wearing these black suits. It was this one person who had like curly hair and was wearing these really cool glasses. It was a guy. He was wearing these kind of grungy jeans. If you know Saint Laurent, you know the aesthetic that I'm talking about. And I was just so nervous. And thank God I went in, because that same person ended up, I think, becoming the store's assistant director, or he was at that time the store's new assistant director. And little did I know, he saw me. Now, I'm bald from chemo, y'all. He saw me and was like, oh, she has to work here. And that was just nothing but the Most High, in my opinion, because at that point, y'all, I barely had enough energy to get to the mall and to walk around it, but to know that somebody saw me and saw my passion, and just off of humble, took my resume and was like, yo, we'll give her a shot. Now, let me just say, this is so abnormal, because I realized that people don't walk off the street into luxury retail. From what I came to understand later, people have been working their way up for years to get into that kind of position. And when I took the job, I didn't know how much they even made. Like, I had been doing some research, but I had no idea. And I remember he gave me my salary, and he was like, I guarantee you that if you just put yourself out there and you work, you're going to earn what you were earning previously. He was like, nobody on my team earned less than $75,000 last year. And I thought to myself, well, if I only make $75,000, I can still eat. And if it means I make less, but I'm happier, I'm okay with that. And so, and I don't mean to say only $75,000. I know that is a lot of money for some people, depending on where you are, especially in the country. But I mean, if I was on the low end of what his staff earned, then I knew I could still pay my bills and eat. It took a few months for me to get from kind of interview to hire. But I remember, girl, when I walked into my boss's office and told her I was leaving, I was so happy. And I would be lying if I told you that they were happy for me. In fact, she was very rude and downright cruel because she felt like I was leaving them in a negative position, despite me giving them 3 weeks notice. But I didn't care because I had to do what was right for me. And I remember a friend at that time saying, well, aren't you concerned about a reference? And let me just tell y'all something right now, that the opportunity that is for you is not going to be limited by nobody. Nobody and nothing. And I believe so wholeheartedly in what I was doing, in the direction that I was being led, and the fact that these opportunities were coming to me. I'd set the intention. I had made the prayer. And when the prayer was answered, I wasn't going to move in fear. So someone else being upset with me about leaving their job and me pursuing my dream was the last thing that I was concerned about. Because even if I had to go back into a career in the law or public policy more traditionally, I'm so much bigger than that one organization and that one person's recommendation. That sounds bananas to me. It did then and it still does now. I wouldn't change one thing about it. And it's because I was covered. And now, look at me. Didn't need to go back and didn't need their reference. Grateful for every opportunity I've ever had, but I recognize that that came as a result of me. And whatever they did for me, I did for myself and for them tenfold. All right, so we got our blush on. As you can see, it's just a nice little kind of reddish burgundy, and I love that. And so what I'm going to do now is use the House Labs, I think it's pronounced, is Lady Gaga's line. This is her highlighter in the color, I don't know because I can't see it no more. But if I find it online, it will be linked. Of course, everything will be linked that I'm talking about today. And I have this wand brush, and we're just gonna wand that across the top, honey, of them cheekbones. Give you a little Naomi Campbell situation. And this for me is kind of like classic Zoom makeup. Not trying to do a whole lot. I'm not necessarily filming for the day. Again, I'm not going to wear a lash. It's just more so that I can feel like I am my best being on camera and in meetings. Take that brush to a little bit on my Cupid's bow. This fan is one of the best things I have ever gotten. I don't make a big fuss about most of my brushes, but that for sure is my favorite one, and I think definitely worth it. So I've done a whole lot, have not done a setting spray yet. If I'm doing a heavier beat, y'all, I definitely go between layers using this product. It is the new setting spray that I tried last year, and I like it a lot. It's by Charlotte Tilbury. And it is her Airbrush Flawless Setting Spray. Party all day and all night. Party all night, stay all day. Let that dry a bit, and we're going to do mascara, and our lip is last. Let's transition now to Saint Laurent, where I worked for 2 years. Best job I ever had. First, it was teaching. Number 2 would be Saint Laurent. It was a graduate degree in fashion. It was the one that I wanted because when I was younger, I actually wanted to study fashion. And my grandparents were like, no way. No hell, as grandma might say, because you said you wanted to be a lawyer. No one ever let me forget it once again. And so I'm happy though, because I attended Florida State, as I said, and Florida State isn't known for fashion. And so I don't even know where that degree or career path would have landed me. Everything ended up right as it was supposed to be. And so at, I think 37, maybe 38, I landed at Saint Laurent. No, that's not true. At 36, maybe, I landed at Saint Laurent. Yep, because I stayed there for 2 years. And in December 2020, I decided that I had been hustling on the side and my side hustles were becoming lucrative. And I got one big contract, and I knew I also had my brand partnerships and other consulting. And that meant that I could buy myself out of that job. While I was there, though, I learned so much about customer service, being able to attend to a client's needs as it relates to their wardrobe and their styling. The pandemic hit, that was wild. And I loved all of my colleagues. And I had never had an experience where I was able to go to work and then come home and not have to stress and not have to work on the weekends. Not feel massively insecure about who I was and what I brought to the table. Everyone was affirming. They cheerleaded me and helped me to understand how to sell at that level. And I just focused on being kind to people and being myself. And we cracked jokes all day on the sales floor. Some days it would be slow, and that would be kind of hard to deal with because I was used to a much more fast pace. But I would just look out the window and dream, to be honest with you, because I knew Saint Laurent was not my last stop. Although I loved it, for me, the schedule was difficult. I didn't want to work every weekend. I did not want to work every holiday. And I'm also at an age at midlife, or at a big age, where my retirement is something that I have to consider. And being 60, standing on my feet in retail, it just didn't feel feasible for me. Not when I had other skills that I was blessed to be able to lean into. And so I worked, though, y'all, probably about 7 days a week during that time, because as I left my policy job, I was building a consulting business specifically around comms and helping nonprofits on social media, etc., and also DEI consulting. I did all those things. And then I did another consulting gig that I still have to this day, which is around public policy analysis and kind of coalition building for an organization in Pittsburgh. Did all them things, girl. I mean, I had a job on top of a job on top of a thing. I was on a call on my break and doing the thing. I just put my nose to the ground and I grinded. And I knew that if my content could continue to land where I wanted it to be, because for the first time I could create and not worry about what my coworkers were going to say or not having enough time to do the thing. If I poured into my content, like I began to do unapologetically, if I continued to build my consulting practice, something was going to come out on the other side of it. And lo and behold, 2 years later, I was able to buy myself out of my job. And so I started January 2021 as a full-time solopreneur. And that leads me to where we are today. Now, we're going to do a part 2 to this thing, girl, because I have to tell y'all why I don't consider myself to be an influencer. I'm using the Big by Definition mascara by Sephora, y'all. I am not an influencer. If someone calls me that, like, I'll, of course, I answer to the name, or if it's on marketing materials about me, I don't deny that that is a role that people associate me with. However, it is not who I see myself as. And you see how that already is starting to pop? I have very, very curly lashes, which is why I do like to wear falsies, y'all, because I feel like my lashes are so curly until you can't see the length. But I say that because my role as a content creator in the digital realm existed before social media. I was kind of at the beginning or around the beginning of blogging. I had a blog when I was in Nigeria working at the Women's Human Rights Organization that I mentioned, because I wanted my family to kind of know what I was up to. And then I stopped that blog when I returned home, and I picked it up again right as I finished law school and before I began to seriously study for the bar. Is when I started politics and fashion, so that was in 2011. I've been at this. And there is no platform, social media or otherwise, that can define me. I mean, even if you exist, if you started your brand during social media, this is still true. And I say this all the time in my solopreneur series. But there's a particular ownership that I think we have convinced ourselves that these platforms have over us that I'm just not down for. I have worked too hard for my freedom to be beholden to the people in Meta. My work exists outside of any one platform as a consultant in multiple realms where I do still get to use that policy hat and analysis, as a digital creative, as someone who shepherds a private community, as someone who also has a podcast. I'm a multi-hyphenate. And simply labeling me as an influencer, I think, doesn't recognize the totality of who I am. And also, as I've said before in my solopreneur series, if something was to happen to TikTok, if it's banned by Congress, if something happens to Meta and it glitches one day, it shuts down, I get hacked. I've been hacked twice and my platform held for ransom twice last year. If and when those things happen, God forbid, I don't want to be left without a source and a means of income. So the best way to describe myself is as a content creator and as a DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant. And for me, that is under a broader umbrella of solopreneur. And I think unlocking that also helps me to dream big and even bigger when it comes down to the kinds of services and even products that I can create one day. So I think the lashes are goody. I think they're goody. I don't know, y'all. This big. And this may be like $10, is one of the best products that I swear Sephora creates. And I love the way that the setting spray kind of dries down because I think it gives my face a nice neutral kind of flawless. I mean, the things say flawless. It truly does that. It gives my makeup this flawless finish. Let's go to a lip. Most days I feel like I would do a gloss. But I'm feeling something different primarily because I want to show y'all this lip that I made at the Lip Lab. If you saw one of my episodes of Vlogmas, then you know that I went down to Lip Lab and had a custom lipstick and 2 custom glosses made. And I made this one and they actually put a name on it for you for your custom color. I'm trying to show it to y'all. Hold up. It says Fall in Love because it reminded me of fall. And I love the color. I wanted something that wasn't quite burgundy but had deeper undertones than your traditional red, and that is the color that we came up with. And it just goes on so satiny smooth. Lip Lab has colors that of course are pre-made. So if you're not near a Lip Lab, you can find something on their website that you may love. I think that looks pretty good, y'all. For just a quick, everyday face once again, I think it looks pretty good. Nothing too fancy. I am not a makeup artist, but it's just enough for me and just the right amount of items as well. Like if I was traveling, as y'all know, I filmed my podcast in Boston. It's not a whole lot. It's definitely not more than I could fit in my Coach makeup bag. It could probably fit in a smaller cosmetic pouch, as a matter of fact. And so I feel good about getting on my Zoom calls today. Many thanks to BetterHelp for sponsoring today's video. I hope that Storytime has been helpful to you. Let me know down below kind of what struck a nerve, what maybe did you see yourself in as far as your reflection and parts of the story that I shared. Or if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those as well. But in the meantime, I will see you good people across the internet. Peace.